Under the fractured moon, a mother's blood etched promises into the frost, binding life where death had long laid claim. Ilara's breath hung in the air like a fragile vow, each exhale a ghost fleeing the bite of the northern wind. The mountains loomed as ancient sentinels, their peaks cloaked in eternal white, where the snow whispered secrets of betrayal to those who dared listen. She clutched the worn shawl tighter around her shoulders, the fabric threadbare from years of mending what others had torn asunder. In her arms, bundled against the unrelenting cold, were the twins, Lear and Syl, her hybrid miracles, their tiny forms warm with the forbidden fire of two worlds entwined. One breath carried the wild musk of wolf, the other the cool shadow of night eternal. They were abominations to the packs, shadows to the covens, yet to her they were the only light in a realm that had branded her an outcast. The exile had come swiftly, as all rejections did in the shadowed valleys of Eldridge. It was 3 moons past when the Alpha's decree echoed through the frozen halls of the Pack's great lodge, a structure of ice-hewn stone and timber, blackened by hearth fires long since dimmed. "The whelps of darkness must not taint our blood," he had growled, his voice a thunder that rattled the icicles from the rafters. Ilara had knelt before him then, her knees sinking into the fur-strewn floor, pleading with eyes that mirrored the storm outside. She was no queen, no warrior of legend, but an Omega whose quiet strength had nursed these children through nights when fever clawed at their veins like vampires at a throat. The Pack had found her in the borderlands years ago, half frozen beside the body of a slain hybrid, a wolf turned by Fang, his mate lost to the birth. The twins had survived only because Ilara's milk flowed with an unnatural warmth, her body yielding to a destiny she could not name. But gratitude was a fleeting guest in the courts of power. The elders spoke of omens, huevos that twisted into hisses under the luna lina, blood that ran cooler in the veins of the young. Whispers grew to howls, accusing her of sorcery, of consorting with the undead lords who prowled the mist-shrouded crags to the east. The vampire prince, they said, had marked the land with his hunger, and her twins were the proof. Eyes that gleamed silver in the dark, skin that paled under the sun, yet burned with inner ferocity. Ilara had seen the fear in their gazes, the way the warriors averted their eyes from the babe's tiny fangs, sharp as frost needles. When the banishment came, it was not with swords, but with silence. A lone cart at dawn, provisions scant as mercy, and the heavy iron gate of the Pack lands clanging shut behind her. Now, the wind howled like a chorus of the damned, whipping snow into veils that blurred the path ahead. Ilara's boots crunched over the frozen trail, each step a defiance against the numbness creeping into her limbs. The central symbol of her torment hung at her throat, a silver locket etched with twin crescent moons interlocking like veins. Inside, a drop of congealed blood from each child mingled with her own, preserved by some ancient rite she had whispered in desperation during their fevered nights. It was no mere trinket. It pulsed faintly against her skin, warm as a heartbeat, a reminder that her blood had woven their fates together. "Hold fast," she murmured to the twins, her voice raw from the cold. Lear stirred in her arms, his small hand clutching her collar, while Syl's breath came in soft, even rhythms, undisturbed by the gale. The forest encroached like a living shroud, pines bowed under snow's weight, their branches clawing at the sky. Distant huevos pierced the night, not the pure calls of her kin, but something fractured, echoing with the lament of beasts torn between worlds. Ilara's heart ached with the weight of it all. She had known love once, fleeting as a summer thaw, with a wanderer whose touch had sparked the hidden fire in her soul. But he was gone, claimed by the very wars that bred such hybrids, and she had been left to bear the consequences alone. Rejection was no stranger to an Omega, born to serve, to yield, but this was a deeper wound, carved into her very essence. The Pack's lore spoke of the goddesses' pathfinders, Omegas gifted with sight beyond the veil, who mended the broken threads of destiny. Was that her curse? To raise what others would slay, only to wander these wastes until the cold claimed them all? As the moon climbed higher, casting its pallid glow over the undulating drifts, Alara crested a ridge. Below lay the valley of shattered stones, remnants of an old temple to the lunar deities, now half buried in ice. Smoke curled faintly from a crevice, perhaps a wanderer's fire, or the breath of something more sinister. Her instincts prickled, the locket warming against her chest like a warning. The twins whimpered in unison, their cries muffled but insistent, as if sensing the shift in the air. She paused, scanning the shadows where torchlight might flicker or eyes gleam with predatory intent. In this forsaken place, enemies wore many faces. Rival packs hungry for territory, vampire scouts seeking fresh blood, or worse, the emissaries of the courts who would end her children's lives to preserve some fragile peace. The wind died to a hush, leaving only the sound of her ragged breaths and the distant crack of ice. Alara pressed on, the locket's chain a cold tether to her resolve. Survival was her creed now, forged in the fires of loss. Yet deep within, a spark flickered, a quiet certainty that the goddess did not abandon her pathfinders, even in the heart of winter's embrace. The valley beckoned, promising shelter or snare, and with it, the first threads of a destiny yet unveiled. The valley unfolded like a scar upon the earth's pale skin, jagged stones thrusting from the snow like the bones of forgotten gods. Alara descended the ridge with cautious steps, the twins' weight an anchor against the vertigo of exposure. The locket at her throat thrummed now, a subtle vibration syncing with the quickened pulse in her veins, as if the mingled blood within sensed peril, or promise, drawing near. Smoke rose in lazy tendrils from the crevice ahead, carrying the faint, acrid bite of burning pine and something metallic, like old iron warmed by flame. Her nostrils flared, instincts honed by years of evasion parsing the sense. No vampire's chill decay, but the raw, earthy tang of wolf, laced with the sharp sting of fresh blood. She halted at the temple's threshold, a crumbling archway etched with lunar runes now dulled by frost. The air hummed with silence, broken only by the crackle of a hidden fire. "Who's there?" Alara called, her voice steady despite the tremor in her limbs. No answer came, save for a low groan that slithered from the shadows, human in its anguish, yet laced with the rumble of a beast's throat. Fear coiled in her gut like a serpent, but curiosity, that reckless spark of an Omega's empathy, urged her forward. She shifted the twins higher in her arms, their warmth a shield against the encroaching dark. Peering into the crevice, she saw him, sprawled against a makeshift wall of fallen slabs, his form half-veiled by swirling eddies of snow. The Alpha King, thorn of the Eldridge Pax, whose name evoked both thunderous command and whispered regrets. Even in torment, his presence dominated, broad shoulders clad in a cloak rent by claw and fang, the fur matted with crimson that seeped into the white drifts. His face, chiseled as the mountains themselves, was pale beneath the wild mane of dark hair, eyes, storm-gray and fever-bright, flickering open to meet hers. A gash marred his chest, visible through the torn leather of his tunic, the wound not healing as it should for one of his bloodline. Silver veins spiderwebbed from it, a curse's cruel embroidery, pulsing with an unnatural chill that spoke of venom deeper than any blade. He was no stranger to her nightmares. Tales of his reign had filtered through the pack's firesides, even to an outcast like her. The king who had united the fractured clans under a banner of iron mercy, only to bear the weight of betrayals that scarred his soul. Whispers said he carried guilt like a second skin, for mates lost to rival wars, for Omegas cast aside in the name of purity. Now, here he lay, felled by ambush, his breath ragged as the wind that moaned through the ruins. Alara's heart stuttered, an instinctive pull tugging at her core, the ancient bond of wolf to alpha flaring unbidden. Yet she recoiled, memories of rejection flooding back, the pack's cold decree, the isolation that had forged her solitude. Why him? Why now, when trust was a luxury she could ill afford? Thorn's gaze sharpened, locking onto the bundle in her arms. His nostrils flared, scenting the anomaly, the hybrid musk that marked her children as pariahs. You, Omega, he rasped, voice gravel over silk, pushing himself upright with a grimace that bared fangs elongated by pain. Blood trickled from his lips, staining the snow at his feet like spilled wine under moonlight. Flee this place. The shadows hunt me, and they spare no witnesses. Alara's feet rooted to the frost, the locket burning hot against her skin, as if the blood within yearned to answer his call. Fear warred with the curiosity blooming in her chest, a fragile flower amid thorns. She saw not the king of legends, but a man broken, his ethical core laid bare in the vulnerability of his wound. The curse's silver threads crept higher, toward his throat, a remnant perhaps of vampire treachery, the very bloodline that tainted her twins. "And leave you to bleed out like a forgotten beast?" she countered, her tone laced with the quiet defiance of one who had survived worse. The twins stirred, Lear's tiny whimper echoing the king's groan, as if their fates brushed in the ether. He laughed, a hollow sound that dissolved into a cough, flecks of red misting the air. "Mercy is a fool's crown in these lands. I've worn it too long." His eyes traced her face, lingering on the locket that gleamed faintly in the fire's glow. Something flickered there, recognition, or the raw hunger of an alpha sensing untapped strength. The connection sparked, instinctive and denied. Her body hummed with the pull, a warmth uncoiling low in her belly. But she rationalized it away as survival's trick, born of isolation and the night's cruel intimacy. The distant howl shattered the moment. Pursuers, their cries a fractured symphony of pack and something colder. Undead. Thorn tensed, his hand groping for a discarded sword half buried in snow. Alara's mind raced. Flee alone or bind her fragile world to this wounded monarch. The locket pulsed in rhythm with her doubt, the mingled blood, a silent vow. Curiosity won, edged with fear. She stepped closer, the fire's heat licking at the chill in her bones. "If the shadows come, they come for us all," she murmured, kneeling to press a strip of her shawl against his wound. The contact seared, her touch drawing a shudder from him, their scents mingling, wild earth and hidden fire under the moon's unyielding watch. As the howls drew nearer, the valley's stones seemed to lean in, witnesses to a bond forged in blood and frost. Thorn's hand closed over hers, brief and electric, before he pulled away, denial etching lines deeper into his face. Yet in that touch, the first thread of empathy wove tight, a reluctant tether against the storm. "And now, I invite you to leave a trace of your presence in the comments. Tell us where in the world you're watching from, and the exact hour you hear this story. We wish to know how far these northern confessions travel, and at what moments of the night they find you." The fire's glow danced like captive spirits on the temple walls, casting elongated shadows that twisted with the encroaching night. Alara's hands trembled as she bound Thorn's wound, the strip of shawl soaking through with his blood, warm and viscous against the icy air. The metallic tang filled her nostrils, mingling with the sharp resin of the flames, a scent that stirred something primal in her core, a reminder that survival demanded more than flight. The twins, nestled in the crook of her arm against her side, quieted as if sensing the fragile alliance forming, their hybrid warmth seeping through her layers like a forbidden hearth. Thorn's breath came in labored bursts, his storm-gray eyes fixed on the crevice's mouth where the howls crescendoed, a cacophony of feral rage and hollow echoes. "They come for me," he murmured, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through the stone at their backs. Rival alphas from the eastern fringes, allied with the prince's thralls. Betrayal festers like rot in the packs, my mercy seen as weakness. He shifted, wincing as the silver curse veins pulsed brighter, snaking toward his collarbone like moonlight on tainted snow. Alara felt the locket at her throat respond, its heat mirroring his pain, the mingled blood within stirring as if alive, whispering of connections forged in desperation. She glanced at the entrance, the wind now carrying the crunch of paws on frost, the faint hiss of cloaks slicing through the gale, vampiric scouts, their movements unnaturally fluid. Fear clawed at her chest, but beneath it bloomed an empathy she could not deny, born of shared exile. He was no distant monarch here. He was a wounded beast, his ethical heart laid bare in the flicker of firelight, guilt etching shadows under his eyes for the omegas he had failed, the bloodlines he had strained to purify. "Then we stand together," she said, her words steady despite the tremor in her soul. It was not love that pulled her, not yet, but the raw recognition of another soul marked by rejection's blade. Her own banishment echoed in his gaze, the weight of choices that scarred deeper than fangs. Thorn's hand found the hilt of his sword, drawing it free with a scrape that echoed like a vow. "Foolish Omega," he growled. Yet there was no command in it, only a melancholy resignation, as if her defiance mirrored the mercy he had once wielded like a crown. He rose unsteadily, positioning himself between her and the threat, his broad frame a bulwark against the storm. Alara cradled the twins closer, their tiny hearts beating in sync with the distant thunder of approaching doom. The locket burned now, a talisman of her hidden strength, urging her to weave protection from the threads of her blood. The first assailants breached the threshold like specters from the mist. 3 wolves from a splinter pack, their fur matted with frost and eyes gleaming with opportunistic hunger, flanked by 2 vampire thralls, pale as moon-kissed marble, their fangs bared in silent menace. The air thickened with the stench of unwashed pelts and the coppery promise of violence. "The king falls tonight," snarled the lead wolf, a scarred brute named Garrick, his voice a guttural challenge. "And his blood will seal the prince's claim on these lands." The vampires hissed in agreement, their forms blurring in the fire's edge, claws extended like shards of ice. Thorn lunged with a roar that shook the loose stones, his sword arcing through the dimness to clash against Garrick's blade. Sparks flew, illuminating the fury in his face, the controlled rage of a leader who had lost too much to unchecked wrath. Blood sprayed as he felled the first thrall, its body crumpling into ash-dusted snow. But the silver curse slowed him. A venomous drag that turned his strikes labored. Ilara's instincts surged. She could not stand idle. With the twins secured in a hollow of stone, she snatched a fallen branch from the fire, its tip blazing like a captured star. The locket pulsed in rhythm with her fear, and as she thrust the flame toward the second vampire, an unnatural heat bloomed from her touch, the warmth of her Omega essence, laced with the hybrid fire she had nurtured in her babes. The creature recoiled, screeching as the fire licked its flesh, not mere flame, but something deeper, a lunar spark that seared the undead core. Thorn glanced back, his eyes widening in the melee, a flicker of awe piercing his denial. "What sorcery is this?" he panted, parrying Garrick's savage blow. Alara met his gaze, her breath ragged, the bond tightening like roots in frozen soil. Empathy swelled into something visceral, a shared pulse, her strength bolstering his as she swung again, driving the thrall into retreat. The wolves circled, but the vampire's withdrawal sowed doubt. One yelped as Thorn's blade found its mark, crimson blooming on white fur. In the chaos, Alara felt the twins' cries pierce the din, a call that stirred the air with ethereal power. The locket opened of its own accord, a single drop of mingled blood welling forth, glistening like dew under the moon's gaze filtering through cracks above. It fell to the stone, and from it rose a veil of mist, shimmering silver, that cloaked their refuge. The attackers faltered, blinded by the spectral haze, their howls turning to confused snarls as they withdrew into the night, the promise of greater forces held at bay, for now. Thorn slumped against the wall, chest heaving, his wound staunched, but the curse unrelenting. Alara knelt beside him, the fire's embers casting a golden halo on her face, the mist dissipating like a sigh from the goddess herself. Their hands brushed as she checked his bandage, the contact electric, igniting a warmth that spread through her veins like thawed blood. He did not pull away this time. Instead, his fingers lingered, tracing the locket's chain with a gentleness that belied his king's ferocity. "You fight like one touched by the moon's grace," he whispered, his voice laced with wonder and the melancholy of a man long denied such alliance. An Omega with fire in her blood and shadows in her arms. She met his eyes, the denial cracking under the weight of their shared survival. The bond was no longer instinct alone. It was empathy forged in battle's crucible, a tether of mutual vulnerability. Yet doubt lingered in her heart. What refuge could a rejected mother offer a fallen king when her own blood invited death? The twins cooed softly, their hybrid eyes reflecting the dying flames, as if the night itself pondered the fragile peace they had carved from peril. Outside, the wind mourned the retreated foes, but within, the fire crackled on, a symbol of the warmth blooming amid the frost. Tentative, resisted, but undeniable. Thorn's gaze softened, guilt shadowing his features as he scented the truth of her exile. "Your children. They carry the very curse that poisons me. Yet you wield it as strength." Alara's throat tightened, the locket cooling against her skin, a silent witness to the moral precipice they teetered upon. To bind to him meant risking all, to flee, abandoning the redemption flickering in his eyes. In that suspended breath, under the moon's watchful arc, she chose the refuge of trust, however fleeting, her hand closing over his in quiet affirmation. The night deepened, howls fading to whispers, but the true storm brewed within, the ethical forge of hearts entwined against destiny's unrelenting pull. The embers of the fire had dwindled to a sullen glow, painting the temple's fractured walls in hues of amber and shadow, as if the flames themselves mourned the night's fragile truce. Alara sat with her back against the cold stone, the twins cradled in her lap, their small chests rising and falling in synchronized rhythm, a quiet miracle amid the ruins. The locket at her throat lay heavy now, its silver surface etched with faint runes that seemed to pulse in time with the distant throb of Thorn's wound. She traced its edges with trembling fingers, the mingled blood within a congealed testament to her hidden burdens, warm against her skin like a secret heartbeat. Exhaustion clawed at her edges, but sleep was a thief she dared not invite. The air still hummed with the residue of battle, the metallic scent of spilled blood lingering like an unspoken accusation. Thorn shifted beside her, his massive frame slumped yet vigilant, the sword across his knees, a silent sentinel. The silver curse veins had retreated slightly under the pressure of her makeshift binding, but they lingered like frostbite's cruel memory, threading through his flesh with insidious grace. His eyes, those storm-gray depths, fixed on her with an intensity that stripped away the veils of denial, searching the lines of her face as if mapping a prophecy long foretold. Guilt shadowed his features, the weight of a king's regrets carving deeper furrows. Omegas cast out under his reign, hybrids slain to preserve the pack's fragile purity. Yet in her presence, something stirred, a melancholy hope flickering like the dying light. "You wield fire not born of wood or spark," he said softly, his voice a gravelly whisper that wove through the hush. "Tell me, Omega, what are you truly? No outcast mother fights with the moon's own fury." Alara's breath caught, the question piercing the armor of her solitude. She had always known the warmth in her veins was no ordinary gift. It had sustained the twins through fevers that would have claimed lesser souls, her milk flowing with a lunar essence that quelled their hybrid torments. But to name it aloud, felt like inviting the wind's howl to shatter her fragile world. The locket warmed, urging confession, and outside, the moon crested the temple's broken dome, its pallid light spilling over them like spilled mercury. Snowflakes drifted through the cracks, settling on the twins' lashes, Lear's dark curls dusted white, Syl's pale skin gleaming ethereal. "I am a pathfinder," she murmured, the words tasting of ancient lore drawn from the pack's whispered tales of omegas touched by the goddess. "Born to mend what blood has torn, my touch carries the moon's grace, healing where others only wound. But it comes at a cost, visions that bleed into dreams, bonds that bind without mercy." As if summoned by her admission, a tremor rippled through the air, the locket flaring hot against her chest. Alara gasped, clutching it as pain lanced through her, a vision unfurling like petals in frost. Images cascaded, thorns passed, etched in crimson. A mate lost to vampire fangs in the border wars, her blood mingling with his in a desperate rite that had cursed him with this silver venom, a hybrid taint he could neither purge nor embrace. Then, the twins, their tiny forms wreathed in light, Lear's wolfish strength merging with Syl's vampiric shadow, a balance that could unravel the curse if woven with her own essence. And beyond, a greater shadow loomed. The vampire prince, Draven, his eyes like polished obsidian, hungering for the hybrids as keys to dominion over the packs. He sought Alara not as prey, but as vessel, her pathfinder blood the forge to amplify his thralls. The vision crested in a howl of wind, blood and moonlight intertwining, revealing her as the fulcrum, healer to the alpha, temptation to the prince, mother to the bridge between worlds. She cried out, the sound raw and visceral, her free hand pressing to Thorn's chest where the curse pulsed. Warmth flooded from her palm, lunar fire seeping into his veins, the silver threads recoiling like shadows before dawn. Thorn arched, a guttural groan escaping his lips, his hand clamping over hers in a grip that was equal parts agony and revelation. The contact ignited something profound, their sense entwining, wild earth and hidden flame, her empathy surging into him like a tide. He saw it then, through her eyes, the locket's blood as catalyst, her gift the key to his redemption, unraveling the guilt that had chained him since his mate's fall. "Goddess, preserve us," he breathed, his voice thick with awe and the melancholy of a man glimpsing salvation. "You are the thread I sought in the dark, the pathfinder who mends kings and curs alike. Your twins, they are no abomination. They are the balance, the hybrid dawn to end this endless night." Alara pulled back, the vision fading into echoes, leaving her drained yet alive with purpose. Tears traced cold paths down her cheeks, freezing in the chill, as the weight of destiny settled like snow on her shoulders. The bond between them deepened, no longer resisted, but acknowledged, a reluctant acceptance born of shared revelation. Thorn's touch lingered on her arm, gentle despite his strength, his ethical core alight with possibility. Yet doubt gnawed at her heart. To embrace this meant drawing the prince's gaze, pitting her quiet renacimento against the storms of power and betrayal. The twins stirred, Lear's eyes opening to silver gleam, Syl's tiny fangs glinting in the moonlight, their hybrid essence humming in harmony with the locket's pulse. Outside, a lone Uivo rose, not threat but omen, carrying the spiritual whisper of the goddess, affirming her role in the weave of fates. Thorn drew her closer, his breath warm against her temple, the fire's last embers crackling like a vow. "I have carried guilt as my crown, rejecting what I could not save," he confessed, his voice laced with tragic romance. "But you offer mercy where I saw only loss. If Draven hunts your blood, he hunts mine as well now." Alara leaned into him, the winds sigh through the stones, a sensory caress, carrying the scent of pine and distant blood. Her dom had manifested not as power, but as truth. a revelation that bound them in ethical fire, where love's proof lay in choosing vulnerability over isolation. The moon watched, unblinking, as the temple cradled their nascent alliance, the locket cooling to a steady warmth, symbol of wounds healing into strength. Yet in the quiet, Alara felt the pull of greater trials, the prince's shadow lengthening, rival packs circling like wolves in the mist. Her heart ached with the moral clarity of it. Redemption demanded sacrifice, her gift the blade to carve freedom from chains. Thorn's hand found hers again, intertwining fingers over the locket. A silent pact under the lunar gaze. The night deepened, fire to ash, but within her the spark of destiny burned eternal, a beacon against the encroaching frost. Comment Luna if you'd walk through the storm for someone who saw your worth. The dawn broke like a reluctant confession, its pale light seeping through the temple's fractured dome, gilding the snow in hues of fragile gold. Alara stirred from the shallow vigil of half-sleep, her body aching from the stone's unyielding embrace, the twins' warmth a fragile anchor against the chill that had deepened through the night. Thorn's presence beside her was a steady heat, his breath even now. The curse's silver veins faded to faint whispers under her touch, yet the air thrummed with unspoken peril. The locket at her throat hung cool and heavy, its mingled blood a dormant sentinel, as if gathering strength for the trials yet to unfold. She traced its edges, the metal smooth as frozen tears, and felt the pull of destiny tightening like a noose. Revelation had bound them, but judgment loomed, demanding she weigh her heart against the world's unyielding blade. Outside, the wind had stilled, leaving the valley in crystalline silence, broken only by the distant crunch of approaching footsteps. Deliberate, armored, a procession that shattered the night's fragile peace. Ilara's instincts flared, her pathfinder senses sharpening to the scent of fur and steel, laced with the acrid bite of betrayal. Thorn rose swiftly, his hand closing around his sword's hilt, the melancholy in his eyes hardening to the steel of a king reclaiming his throne. "They come," he murmured, his voice a low thunder that resonated in her bones. The pack's elders, no doubt, summoned by Garrick's failure. And worse, Dreven's emissaries, drawn by the scent of hybrid blood. His gaze met hers, guilt flickering like embers in storm clouds. The ethical weight of his past pressing upon him, the decrees that had exiled Omegas like her, the wars that birthed such curses, all in the name of a purity now revealed as hollow. She gathered the twins closer, Lear's small hand fisting in her shawl, Syl's eyes opening to gleam with that unnatural silver, as if they too sensed the gathering storm. The locket warmed against her skin, a pulse sinking with the quickening beat of her heart, urging her toward the confrontation she had long evaded. Freedom whispered in her veins, the wild solitude of the wastes, where she could raise her children unseen, unbound by kings or princes. Yet love's shadow stirred, resisted and rationalized as mere survival's illusion, now demanding acceptance in the face of loss. "What of your pack?" she asked, her voice steady despite the tremor of doubt. "Will they see redemption in you? In us?" Thorn's jaw tightened, the scar of old battles etching deeper lines, his melancholy a cloak he could no longer shed alone. The procession crested the ridge like specters from a fractured past, torches flaring against the morning mist, their flames dancing shadows across armored forms. At their fore rode Garrick, the scarred traitor, his wolfish grin bared in triumph, flanked by pack elders in cloaks of gray steel, their faces etched with the rigid piety of tradition. Behind them slithered Draven's envoy, a lithe vampire lord named Vesper, his skin pale as moonlit ice, eyes like polished onyx fixed hungrily on Alara's form. The air thickened with tension, the scent of pine and blood mingling with the cold rot of undead ambition, Weavos rising in challenge from the pack's ranks. "Thorn, fallen king," Garrick bellowed, dismounting with a clash of boots on frost, his blade drawn and gleaming. Your mercy has weakened us. The prince offers alliance, your throne for the hybrid's blood. Deliver the Omega and her whelps, and spare your cursed line. Thorn stepped forward, positioning himself as shield, his broad frame a wall of unyielding resolve. The sword in his grip caught the dawn's light, a silver arc mirroring the locket's gleam. Betrayal suits you ill, Garrick, he replied, his tone laced with the tragic depth of a man who had once called him kin. I cast no more into exile for your fears. These children are no curse, they are the dawn you dread. The elders murmured, their eyes darting to Alara, recognition dawning in the faces that had once decreed her banishment. Whispers of sorceress and pathfinder slithered through the ranks, the weight of past sins crashing upon her like an avalanche. She felt the rejection anew, sharp as fangs in tender flesh, the pack's gaze stripping her of the quiet dignity she had forged in isolation. Vesper glided closer, his presence a chill wind that raised gooseflesh on her arms, the twins whimpering in response. The prince desires you, Pathfinder, he purred, voice silk over venom, his gaze tracing the locket as if scenting its power. Your blood, mingled with the hybrids, could unmake kings and raise empires. Join us. Freedom from these beasts, power beyond their petty wars. The offer hung like a poisoned rose, tempting with the liberty of shadows, where her gift could bloom unchecked, her children exalted rather than slain. Alara's heart warred, the locket burning hot now, visions flickering at its edges. Draven's court of eternal night, where love twisted into possession versus Thorn's side, where compassion demanded sacrifice, forgiveness a crown heavier than iron. Garrick lunged then, blade whistling through the air, igniting the fray. Thorn met him with a clash that echoed off the stones, sparks flying like stars in the frost. His movements a blend of raw power and restrained mercy, the ethical dance of a king who refused to become the monster he fought. Alara backed toward the temple's mouth. The twins clutched tight, but the elders advanced, their faces twisted in zealous fury. "For the purity of the blood!" one snarled, lunging with claws extended. Instinct surged. She pressed her palm to the locket, drawing forth a drop of the mingled essence, letting it fall to the snow. It bloomed into a barrier of shimmering mist, lunar fire repelling the attackers, their howls turning to cries of awe and fear. The Pathfinder's dome flared visceral, warmth flooding her veins, but it drained her, knees buckling under the cost, visions of bloodied futures where war consumed all. Vesper seized the chaos, blurring toward her, fangs bared in predatory grace. "Come willingly, or your king dies chained," he hissed, his hand grazing her arm, cold as grave soil. Thorn roared, breaking from Garrick to intercept, his sword biting deep into the vampire's shoulder, black ichor spilling like ink on white. The lord recoiled, but not before whispering temptations into her ear. Power, safety for the twins, an end to rejection's sting. Ilara's choice crystallized in that frozen instant, love or freedom, forgiveness or war. To yield to Draven meant liberty's illusion, her heart forever shadowed. To stand with Thorn was to embrace war's forge, pardoning the pack's sins through her own vulnerability, her gift the bridge to redemption. She thrust forward, her hand finding Thorn's in the melee, lunar warmth surging through their bond, bolstering his strike. Garrick fell back, wounded but unbroken, the elders hesitating as the mist unveiled truths, visions of their own past betrayals, the guilt Thorn had borne alone now shared like a communal wound. "Enough!" Ilara declared, her voice cutting through the din like moonlight on steel, raw with the tragedy of her resolve. "I choose mercy, not for you, but for what we might become. The hybrids live, the curse breaks, or we all perish in the frost." The locket pulsed in affirmation, blood's warmth a vow against despair, as Vesper retreated into shadow, his eyes promising pursuit. The confrontation ebbed, bodies strewn like fallen leaves, the pack's ranks fracturing under the weight of moral reckoning. Thorn turned to her, bloodied but unbowed, his hand lingering on hers, the melancholy in his gaze yielding to profound gratitude. Yet Alara's soul ached with the choice's cost. Freedom bartered for love's proof, forgiveness a blade that cut both ways. The twins' cries pierced the settling silence, a spiritual call under the rising sun, as the mountains bore witness to her judgment. Not victory, but the ethical precipice where Renacimento teetered on sacrifice's edge. The wind stirred anew, carrying the scent of blood and thawing earth, whispering of trials yet to come, where destiny demanded one final, heart-wrenching leap. The sun climbed higher, its rays fracturing through the valley's crystalline veil, turning the bloodied snow into a mosaic of crimson and gold, as if the earth itself wept for the choices etched in frost. Alara stood amid the settling chaos, her breath ragged, the twins' warmth a fierce pulse against her chest, anchoring her to the precipice of Renacimento. The locket at her throat thrummed like a second heart, its silver surface slick with the dew of exertion, the mingled blood within stirring with the raw essence of her decision. Mercy, not as weakness, but as the forge of true power. Thorn's hand remained clasped in hers, his grip a tether forged in the fire of shared wounds, his storm-gray eyes reflecting the dawn's hesitant promise, guilt yielding to the quiet fire of acceptance. Yet the air hung heavy with unresolved shadows. Vesper's retreat was no surrender, merely a predator's pause, and Garrick's fractured pack milled uneasily. Their howls silenced by the ethical storm Ilara's stand had unleashed. She felt the Pathfinder's gift coil within her, no longer a hidden ember, but a blaze demanding culmination, a sacrifice to heal the fractures of blood and fate. Visions flickered at the locket's edges. Draven's obsidian throne in the eastern crags, where the vampire prince awaited, his hunger a vortex that could consume worlds, drawn inexorably by the hybrid spark she nurtured. He wanted her not for conquest alone, but to wield her essence as a weapon, twisting the twins' balance into eternal night. Freedom tempted still, a whisper of unbound skies where rejection's scars faded into irrelevance. But love's proof burned brighter. Thorn's ethical soul, marked by the same culpability that had exiled her, now offering union as redemption's crown. "The storm is not over," she murmured, her voice a thread of wind through the pines, raw with the tragedy of what must come. The twins stirred, Lear's wolfish growl mingling with Syl's soft hiss, their hybrid eyes gleaming with instinctive knowing, as if the goddess herself breathed through their tiny forms. Thorn drew her aside, away from the elders' watchful gazes, his cloak enveloping them like a shroud against the encroaching chill. The wound on his chest had knit under her lunar touch, the silver curse reduced to faint scars like veins of moonlight on marble. Yet his melancholy lingered, a king's burden unshouldered. "You chose me over the shadows," he said, his breath warm against her temple, carrying the earthy musk of healed earth and lingering blood. "But Draven will not yield. He sensed the key to his dominion in your blood, in ours." His fingers traced the locket, gentle as a vow, igniting a warmth that spread through her veins, unraveling the last threads of resistance. Love was no immediate blaze. It had simmered in denial, rationalized as alliance, now accepted as the ethical heart of her Renacimento. Proof that an Omega's quiet strength could crown the fallen, mending what power had shattered. The ground trembled then, a low rumble that stirred the snow into swirling veils, as if the mountains themselves bowed to the unfolding destiny. From the eastern mist emerged Draven's vanguard, a phalanx of thralls and shadowed wolves, their forms blurring in the dawn's haze, led by the prince himself. He rode at their fore, a figure of lethal elegance, his skin luminous as polished ivory, eyes twin abysses that drank the light. Crimson silk draped his frame, stained with the dew of night hunts, and his presence chilled the air to a blade's edge, the scent of ancient blood and wilted roses preceding him like a curse. Vesper flanked him, shoulder-bandaged in black ichor, his gaze locking on Ilara with possessive hunger. "Pathfinder!" Draven called, his voice a silken thunder that echoed off the stones, resonant with the spiritual allure of forgotten gods. "You stand at the crossroads of worlds. Join me, and your hybrids become heirs to eternity. No rejection, no exile, only the freedom of night unbound." The pack tensed, Garrick's traitors slinking forward with opportunistic snarls, while the elders whispered prayers to the lunar deities, their faith fracturing under the weight of moral ambiguity. Thorn stepped before her, sword raised, his form a bulwark of unyielding compassion, the scars on his chest glowing faintly under the rising sun. "She is no prize for your shadows, Prince," he growled, the rumble in his throat a echo of ancient weavos, laced with the melancholy of a man who had lost too much to ambition's blade. Ilara's heart clenched, the locket searing hot now, demanding the final choice: sacrifice her solitude for Union's healing fire, or yield to the prince's liberty, dooming the light she had kindled. The twins whimpered, their cries a visceral symphony, Lear's warmth flaring like inner flame, Syl's cool shadow weaving protective tendrils around her legs. Draven dismounted with predatory grace, the snow hissing under his boots, his eyes fixed on the locket, as if it pulsed with the very blood he craved. "Your king offers chains disguised as mercy," he purred, extending a pale hand, nails sharp as frost. "I offer truth, your gift amplified, your children exalted beyond the beast's petty wars." Garrick lunged in support, blade flashing toward Thorn, igniting a maelstrom of steel and fang. The valley erupted in visceral chaos, howls blending with hisses, blood spraying like rubies on white canvas, the wind whipping torch flames into frenzied dancers. Thorn parried with ethical fury, his strikes measured to wound rather than kill, sparing even traitors in his quest for redemption. Ilara backed into the temple's shadow. The twins clutched tight, but Draven blurred toward her, his chill aura raising gooseflesh, fangs glinting in the light. In that suspended breath, her choice crystallized, love as sacrifice, not reward. She tore the locket free, the chain snapping like a broken vow, and pressed it to her palm, drawing forth the mingled blood in a glistening rivulet. "No more division," she whispered, her voice a poetic incantation under the sun's gaze, raw with the tragedy of yielding self for greater weave. The essence bloomed, lunar fire erupting in a cascade of silver light that enveloped the fray. It surged into Thorn, fully unraveling the curse, his scars fading to smooth skin, strength flooding his veins like thawed rivers. To the twins, it wove balance, their hybrid forms glowing ethereal, Lear's ferocity tempered by Syl's calm, a harmony that repelled the thrall's advance. And to Draven, it struck true, a searing revelation of his own shadowed guilt, visions of lost empires crumbling under unchecked hunger, forcing him back with a howl of existential anguish. The prince staggered, his vanguard faltering as the light pierced their undead cores, ash flurrying like black snow. Garrick fell to his knees, the traitor's fire quenched by the ethical blaze, while the elders bowed, whispers of goddesses Pathfinder rising like incense. Draven's eyes met Ilara's one final time, not with rage, but profound recognition, the melancholy of a soul glimpsed in the mirror of her mercy. He retreated into the mist, his form dissolving like smoke, the promise of future shadows lingering but broken for now. Thorn sheathed his sword, turning to her, bloodied and whole, his arms enveloping her and the twins in a union forged of fire and frost. "You healed what I could not," he breathed, his lips brushing her temple, the warmth of acceptance blooming in her core. a romantic tragic dawn where rejection birthed royalty. Ilara leaned into him, the empty locket chain a cool reminder at her throat. The blood sacrifice etched into her soul as Renacimiento's seal. The pack gathered, tentative oaths of fealty murmured under the sun, the valley stirring with the first green shoots piercing the snow, symbols of life's defiant return. Yet in her heart, the dilemma lingered, spiritual and profound. Power through compassion had triumphed, but at what hidden cost? The twins cooed, their eyes reflecting the infinite sky, as wind carried distant weavos of renewed packs, the moon's spiritual echo promising that every wound, healed, became legend. Under the eternal watch of mountains and heavens, Ilara's choice endured, love as eternal proof, redemption's flame kindled against the encroaching night. If your heart beat alongside ours, like, comment, and subscribe, because every soul that joins our moon keeps the flame of redemption alive.